Welcome to The Art of Medicine, the program that explores the arts, business, and clinical aspects of the practice of medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Andrew Wilner. Today, I have the opportunity to chat with Dr. Manuel Flores, Executive Vice President of Academic Affairs and Provost at the University of Health Sciences, Antigua. Dr. Flores is going to share his background in medical education, tell us about his medical school in Antigua, and also discuss the phenomenon of explosive growth of medical schools in the Caribbean. But before we get started, I'd like to thank our sponsor, locumstory.com. If you're considering locum tenens, either full-time or on the side, you probably have a question or two, or 20. Fortunately, locumstory.com has the answers you need. It's packed with unbiased information and advice from physicians like you. Locumstory.com has nothing to sell. It's simply a resource for information. You'll find super handy tools that let you see locums trends for your specialty, compare different locums agencies, and there's even a quiz to help you decide if locums is right for you. Locumstory.com is the perfect place to start if you want to learn more about locums. And now, Dr. Flores, welcome to the Art of Medicine.
Thank you for inviting me.
Dr. Flores, I'm interested. I just did a quick sort of Wikipedia review, and I saw that since 1999, I guess, was the date I picked, there are 50 new medical schools in the Caribbean. It's like, well, gee, the Caribbean doesn't have that many people. Antigua, for example, last count, I think there were 100,000 permanent residents, and there are 2 medical schools. So that's kind of what I'm interested, as a medical educator at the University of Tennessee myself. And so first, tell us your background. How did you come to be in Antigua?
I was born and raised in Spain. My father had to go to medical school because he wasn't admitted to an American medical school. So he had to go to Spain to actually start and complete his medical education.
Let me interrupt you, because this is what we're going to be talking about. It's a fact that there are many students who apply to medical school, like your dad, who are perfectly qualified. They're smart, they're industrious, they have good grades, but the number of slots is insufficient to accommodate the number of qualified students. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. That is exactly right. No, not only that, with this way that here in the United States we have organized our medical education, we have strangled ourselves. Basically, the number of graduates from medical schools here in the United States is not sufficient to provide for later on for the number of physicians that we really need in this country.
All right, so that's where we're going to get back to. Now, I want you to tell me, so your dad ends up in Spain. I guess that was the obvious place because he's from Puerto Rico and he speaks Spanish, and Spain has a long history of excellent medical education going back hundreds of years, right?
Right, and not only that, his best friend was going to Spain too, because he wasn't admitted to medical school in Puerto Rico either.
Remember, so he's got a roommate. He's got a roommate. Perfect.
Right. Puerto Rican medical schools are like medical schools in the United States. They have to be accredited by the same agency. They go by the same rules because it's the same country. Okay, so he wasn't admitted to medical school in Puerto Rico, and he had to go to medical school in Spain. And I didn't have to go through that. I went to medical school in Puerto Rico, but my dad had to go through that. In any case, what happened to me, and it's kind of like an interesting story. What happened to me is that when I finished my medical school, I went to do my residency in internal medicine in Michigan. And we were assigned as part of our residency program, what they call a clinical pathology conference. So they give you a case, You had to solve it, and you had to present it to everybody, the residents, the attendings, the medical students, everybody, a big auditorium in front of everybody. I was scared to death because it was my first time doing something like that. And I don't know why it came out naturally. And at the end, everybody congratulated me. And I was like, I like to teach. It was the first time I realized I like to teach, right? I never thought I thought I was going to graduate, go into a private practice, and that's it. But I realized that I really like to teach. And education has been the center of my life ever since. And when I finished my internship, I went to private practice for a while. I got involved with the University of Puerto Rico to teach. And then I got involved with a medical school in Puerto Rico called San Juan Bautista Medical School. And that's where I really started to grow as a teacher of medicine and as an academic administrator. Because I started in that medical school, the clinical skills department. It was clinical skills and community engagement department. And I was the department chair of that newly created department. After that, I became the Dean of Health Sciences of a university in Puerto Rico. And then my wife and I decided that we wanted to give our son more opportunities here in the United States. So we decided to move to the United States, and I started to look for a job here. We decided that we wanted to be in the East Coast because it's good flights back home whenever we wanted to go, and the good food of Puerto Rico. We wanted to enjoy that once in a while. And one of the places I applied to was this university that is based in Aruba as the Dean of Clinical Sciences of that medical school. I had heard at that time about the Caribbean medical schools, but I was not that familiar with them and the way they work and the way they're organized, because it's a completely different way. The organization of most medical schools in the Caribbean is different from the organization of the medical schools here in the United States. So I applied, and 5 minutes later, the chief of academic affairs of that university, that now is a great friend of mine, Dr. Ben Stalnaker, he called me and he said, "Can you come to New York tomorrow?" And I said, "Tomorrow?" And he said, "Yes, tomorrow." And I said, "Okay, let's go to New York tomorrow." And after I met with him and the president, they offered me the job, and here I am. And I came to New York because their corporate office is here in New York. And I worked for them for a few years. And then I was recruited by this medical school, the University of Health Sciences Antigua, where I work right now as the vice president of academic affairs and provost. And now I'm the interim dean too of the medical school. So,
all right. Now, for those who haven't been in the process, when a student wants to become a physician, they need to go to college for 4 years and then traditionally go to medical school, which in the United States is 4 years. And then they need to do a internship in order to become licensed, and a residency, which is a separate problem. So that's a different school usually, and a different application process. But the application for residency will depend upon successfully graduating from a medical school, and that medical school must be what's called accredited. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned, I think that, so tell us about accreditation. How does one get accredited? Are all of the medical schools accredited? Or if they're not, what is it? Is there any point in going to a medical school that's not accredited? How does all that work?
It is very different process from what we have in the United States as what we have in the Caribbean. In the United States, there's an agency called the Liaison Committee on Medical Education, the LCME, that accredits all medical schools in the United States and Canada. Before I say that, I want to mention what accreditation is. Accreditation is basically a peer review process of the medical school. And basically what they do is they, through that process in which they have what we call standards of accreditation, they basically say, you comply with those standards or you don't comply with those standards, okay? If you comply with the standards, you get accredited. If you don't comply with those standards, you don't get accredited. Meaning that your students here in the United States, if you come from a non-accredited medical school, your students will not be able to sit for the licensing examinations, like the USMLE, okay? And therefore your students will not be able to practice medicine in the United States of America. That's basically the way it goes. In the Caribbean, and for that, for that instance, in any other country in the world, accreditation is not necessary. Okay, you just have to be approved by the government of your country. Okay, and then you get listed with the World Health Organization, and then your students are able to sit to take the USMLE here in the United States. If they pass the USMLE, then they can go into, they can get licensed after they finish their internship and residency program. That was the way it was up until 2010. In 2010, ECFMG, which is the Education Commission for Foreign Graduates, it's basically a semi-public, it's privately owned, but it's approved by the government of the United States. And what they do is they verify the credentials of the medical students that come from any foreign country that want to come to the United States and get licensed here and practice medicine or get into a residency program. And usually is they do all the credentialing in order for the students to take USMLE, which is the U.S. Medical Licensing Examination. And it has basically 3 parts. So in order to be credentialed to take USMLE, first, ECFMG has to do all the credentialing for you. Basically, what they do is the student provides a lot of information, and then they go to the medical school and they basically ask us, is this student a bona fide student of the university? And we say, yeah, yes, he is. He graduated, or he's in his 3rd year or 2nd year. He can take USMLE from our standpoint. And then they stamp it. The student goes and takes USMLE, the 1st and 2nd part. Now, in 2010, USMLE decided to do something that I think was very, very smart. And basically, they said, in order for students to be, by the year 2023, in order for students to be able to sit for USMLE, they have to come from a medical school that is accredited by an agency that has similar standards of accreditation, similar to the standards that LCME has. Okay, so you have to be accredited by the year 2023. If you don't come from a university that is accredited by an agency that we accept as an agency that has these types of standards, then your students will not be able to sit for USMLE and therefore will not be able to be licensed or practice in the United States of America or Canada. Now, COVID happened in 2000, by the end of 2019, start of 2020. So that basically put a stop to all that because, of course, medical schools that were in the pipeline to be accredited couldn't be accredited because we had all the shutdowns, all these things. So everything had to be put to a stop. And what they said, well, now it's going to be the year 2024. COVID continued, and now what they are saying is that they still this happened in October this year. These medical schools, the ECFMG will credential the students, take USMLE, but they will put another date in the near future, we don't know when, for accreditation of these medical schools. And but they will continue to credential the students to take the USMLE now indefinitely until they put another date. And that was basically because of the pandemic. So that's basically what has happened with this. Caribbean medical schools exist basically for two reasons. The good reason is to provide a second opportunity to the students that were not admitted to medical schools in the United States, because there's a very limited amount of spots here in the United States for students that want to become doctors. It's a very competitive process. Only a very few amount of students, a very small percentage of the students that actually apply to medical school, between 20 and 30% of the students that apply to medical school are admitted to medical school here in the United States. So that leaves you with 80 to 70% of students that their dreams are crushed in a second. And from those, a lot of them are really qualified to become doctors. They have what it takes to become a doctor. So we're the second opportunity for those students, because of course, like our medical school, we're listed with the World Health Organization, so our students can come to Antigua, do their first 2 years of medical education, then they come to the United States, so they're only out of the States for 2 years. They come back to the United States, they do their clinical clerkships here in the United States, and then they take, after they finish their basic sciences, they take their first part of the USMLE. If they pass, they continue into their clinical rotations. Then they take the second part of the USMLE before they graduate. It's a requirement in our medical school for our students to pass both parts of the USMLE in order to graduate. So we know that the students that graduate from the medical school are qualified to be physicians and to enter a residency program. And that is one of the reasons for this to exist. The second reason, of course, the first medical school that appeared in the Caribbean with this model was St. George's in the island of Grenada, back in 1978, I think it was. So that medical school, they came up with this model, and a lot of other medical schools started to appear throughout all the Caribbean islands, because they saw, of course, a financial opportunity. Now we have,
right. It's expensive to go to any medical school.
That's right. Our medical schools in the Caribbean are usually cheaper than the medical schools here in the United States. So that's also an attractive. It's also attractive because you say, like we say in our island, Antigua has 365 beaches, one beach for every day of the year. Okay, so it was a financial opportunity for several groups of people or persons that decided, look, I do have the money to start a medical school in the Caribbean, which is cheaper than to start it here in the United States. I don't have to create a whole university or medical school that is attached to a university. I don't know, medical schools here in the United States are usually started by universities. I can start a long-standing medical school that is not attached to a university. I'll start my own university, and I can provide that medical education from the students that are coming from the United States, Canada, and now it's expanding to the whole world. The UK, for example, Australia, things like that. They want to come to these medical schools, and a lot of people from India, for example, want to come to these medical schools because it's an entrance to the medical system in the United States. So that's basically, in a nutshell, what we do.
I want to talk, just to clarify, the USMLE. My understanding is after the first 2 years of medical school, which is basic science, anatomy, physiology, histology, there's an exam. You got to pass that, and that's national. So you gotta do well, and doesn't matter, what school you're from. They don't care. It's some computer that's going to grade it. And if you pass that, then the next 2 years are clinical, which typically in American schools, they farm you out to the hospital and you do rotations. And if I heard you correctly, the Caribbean schools have made arrangements with hospitals in the United States for their students to join these rotations, so that then they will also receive a similar training and then sit for the exam at the end of 4 years, part 2. And then I guess part 3 is after internship. Is that correct?
Yeah, you have to graduate. No, not after internship. You have after you graduate from medical school. You have to have a diploma from
after you have your diploma, and then if you pass part 3, you're eligible for residency, or is that?
No, you're able to, for residency after part 2. Most residency programs require that you pass part 3 after your internship. But if you do not enter an residency program, you can take it as a loan, as a person on your own. You just have to apply for it, and you can take it.
All right.
Most residency programs require for you to pass step 3 in the year before you finish your internship, your PGY1.
Now, you mentioned that you thought the accreditation, the new rule in 2010, was a good idea. Why is that?
Because it guarantees that the medical education programs throughout the Caribbean and the people that want to practice as doctors here in the United States, you guarantee that they have they come from a sound medical education program. You can pass a test. That doesn't mean that you're a good doctor. Okay? Passing a test doesn't mean that you're a good doctor. Being a good doctor requires a lot of other things. It requires experience, and I mean, a piece of paper doesn't say that I'm a good doctor. It requires that I have seen this amount of patients in my clinical rotations. It requires that I have created the clinical skills necessary in order to become a good doctor. I can say in a piece of paper, a person that has this type of murmur has aortic stenosis or has whatever. If I have never heard that sound, I will never be a good doctor. So those things are important. Another thing that is very important is the continuous improvement of the program. How do I detect in my program what are my challenges, what are my weaknesses, what are my strengths, and how can I improve on my strengths and my weaknesses and my challenges in order to make them strengths of my program, so I can have a better product, and our product is better graduates, better doctors when they come out. So those are things, and that's the fundamental of accreditation is how do you find these weaknesses that you have? What is the process that you go through in order to find weaknesses in your medical education program in order to correct them so you can provide a better medical education for your students? So those are the things that are in accreditation, and that's why accreditation is not only a good idea for medical schools in the Caribbean or all over the world, it's a good idea for any type of educational program, not only medical schools, law school, education, any type of business, any type of educational program will actually benefit from this type of peer review, because the only thing that it can do to you is make you better every time.
Now, of the medical schools in the Caribbean, are most of them accredited?
Now, no. Right now, no. Right now, because again, because of the pandemic, there are several accreditation agencies that have the ECFMG has approved. In our case, for example, is CAMHP. There's another one called ACCM. If you go, for example, in Aruba and Bonaire and Curacao, they are accredited by the Netherlands because they're part of the Netherlands. So there are several. The problem is with the pandemic, a bottleneck was created. So there are hundreds, most medical schools applied, and they're waiting for
but
accreditation.
hypothetically, they are at the standard. It's just a technicality to get them through the process. I mean, my question is, are there schools that are not up to speed that, you know, students are spending money, they're getting a diploma when they graduate, but then they haven't received the training, they're not going to pass their exams, and it's kind of a big waste of time for everybody. Is that a possibility?
Of course, that's a possibility. There's a possibility that some medical schools, and that has happened in the past, some medical schools, they can become diploma factories. Yeah, and they had in the past. Recently, a medical school in the Caribbean had to close up. ECFMG actually shut them down completely because they were basically a diploma factory. They didn't have one of the first things that a doctor has to be is an ethical professional person, and these people were not either ethical nor professional, and they were just diploma factories. So some medical schools in the Caribbean were like that.
All right, so not great role models. So let me ask, I want to move on to what happens next. So the first bottleneck for a young person who wants to be a doctor after graduating college, getting into medical school, completing medical school, then they have to find a residency for further training in internal medicine, or in my case, neurology, or to become a surgeon. And that's usually at a different institution. So if we graduate more students so that there can be more doctors, what about, are there enough places for them? In other words, are there residency programs with slots, or are they now just, they have their medical degree, but nowhere to go? Does that happen?
That is a horrible problem. And we have created it ourselves because I think it's our fault as doctors here in the United States. We think we're an elite. We're better than everybody else. A lot of doctors think they are. And that only la crème de la crème can go to medical school. And that has created, as I said, this huge problem that now not only doctors, nurses too. My wife works for a healthcare company. They can't find nurses. They can't find doctors because there are not enough out there. And that is a big problem that we have created ourselves, because we have, number one, a small amount of spots for students that want to be doctors here in the United States. And then we do not have enough residency programs here in the United States. So right now, we already have people that are, a lot of people here in the United States. One of the most industrialized, advanced countries in the world, and we do not have enough doctors. You go to, not only, you don't have to go to a rural area in North Dakota to have to drive 3 hours to see a doctor. Go to the inner cities here in Philadelphia, in New York, in Chicago. They're underserved, and they live in a big city here in the United States. And you have a lot of people that are underserved because there's a lot of physicians. And it's not only because there's not enough spots in medical schools, it's because we don't have enough residency programs here in the United States to cover that. So it is a huge problem. Back in 2000, 2000, this was 2010, AAMC the Association of American Medical Colleges, recommended to medical schools to increase their recruitment by 30%, and then with Obamacare, it was ordered to increase the number of residency programs by 30% too. But AAMC said, yeah, do this. But they didn't, where do we get the money to do that? The medical schools. Uh, because this is not as easy as it sounds. When you increase the number of students, you have to increase the number of faculty, you have to increase the number of human resources, you have to increase the number of physical resources, the number of everything. And that, implies that I have to spend a lot of money to do that. Same with residency programs. Well, Obamacare had money to do that, but it has to start a residency program has a lot of other implications and a lot of other problems that come with it. So in the end, we stayed with this basically the same number of medical graduates and the same number of residency programs that we've had since the 80s.
So can a medical student, suppose someone graduates either from an American school or from the Caribbean, and it's a legitimate program, and they pass all their tests and they apply for residency, they want to be an ENT physician, and they don't get accepted anywhere. Can they go out offshore? Can they go to another country and do a residency and come back? Or will that residency be acknowledged, or must that residency actually be done in the US?
Usually, no, unless they come from, I like to call them medical friendly countries. So if you go to England or the United Kingdom, usually yes, they'll accept it. But if you go, for example, to Spain, they will not accept it here in the United States. So you have to go to do your residency here in the United States if you wanted to, or Canada. Canada is also here in the United States a medical friendly country, like to call them that way. So yeah, they'll accept that residency program here in the United States, from the UK too. But if you go to any of most countries, they will not accept that residency program. So the students that do not, we call it the match. It's a process in order to get into the residency program. If they do not match, a lot of students have to try over and over again until eventually they do, or some of them, they never do get into a match.
All right. Well, just for my own information, are you recruiting for teachers in your medical school in Antigua?
We do have several faculty members that are from Antigua. Several faculty members that are from Antigua. Some of them are general practitioners, and we do have several professors and instructors in our program that did their medical school and residency program here in the United States and went back home. They were from Antigua. They came to the United States for medical school, and they did the residency program here. They went back home, and now they're our attendings. Yes.
That's cool. So before we wrap up, if I'm applying to medical school and it looks like it's a little sketchy, my chances, should I consider a Caribbean medical school? And given that there's so many of them, more than 50, how would I even begin to sort of know how to start? Is there an organization that will help me? Can you give me your phone number? I'll have the students call you, or, where do they start?
Doing good research first. A lot of Caribbean medical schools, as you said, they may be sketchy, some of them. Shop around, ask your friends that have, that have either gone to one of these medical schools or that have friends that gone to any of these medical schools. There are medical schools with pretty good reputation, like us, for example. Other medical schools in the Caribbean, I mentioned St. George's. St. George's was the first one. It has been there forever. Hundreds of graduates like us. We started in 1982, so we were one of the first ones. So if this medical school has been there for a long time, it's been solid. Uh, Usually, they have been there for a long time because the product, the graduates that they have produced, they have been able to go and do the residency program, get licensed, and are practicing here in the United States. I met right now one of our graduates. She's an anesthesiologist in North Carolina. She's now part of the board of trustees of our medical school, Dr. Pelham, and you can see, since 1982, 1978 was the first one, we have been solid throughout all these years. So longevity, I think it's one of the first things that you have to see in this medical school. If you have one that started in 2008, 2009, it's been there for a very small amount of time. You have to be careful with those. And then look for people that graduated from that medical school. What are they doing? How successful have they been in their careers? And that tells a lot about the medical school, because that's when you got your basics. That's when you became a doctor. So that's what I would do.
How competitive is it? Say I applied. I haven't been to medical school yet, and I applied to your school. How many applications are there per spot?
It depends on the class, because usually we have more in the fall than we have in the other ones, because of course people want to start their medical school. Usually, like here, they graduate during summertime, so they want to start medical school in the fall. It's usually not. It's not as competitive as getting into medical school in the United States. If you comply with the requisites and the academic requisites and the MCAT, that we, of course, like most medical schools with the pandemic, we have to stop accepting MCAT because nobody was taking it. So if you comply with that, you have to go through an interview process with the faculty members. You have to have at least a 2.5 GPA, which is lower than in the United States. But we look at other things, such as what you can bring to the medical program and what you can bring as a doctor later on. Usually we don't accept a lot of people with 2.5 GPA. Most our students have a 3.5, 3.4, 3.2 GPA. And then we accept, you have to go through a process where you go through the admissions committee. The admissions committee then sees all your all the portfolio that you bring, and then they say this person is admitted, this person is not admitted. But usually the percentage is way higher than in the American medical schools.
Thanks for explaining that. Dr. Flores, I'm going to wrap up this discussion. It's been very enlightening to me, brought me back to my medical school application days, which were not as straightforward as they might have been. So I've appreciated learning how the system works. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, if any students that are watching this program are interested, you can go to our webpage, learn about us. We have an open door policy for anybody. We are a small school. We like to call our schools a boutique medical school. So you can go to our webpage. It's www.uhsa.ag, and learn more about us and other medical schools. And if you have any questions, you can write to our admissions office, and we will be more than happy to help anybody that wants to learn more about these medical schools and help you out.
Well, thanks for that. And I'll put that information in the show notes. Dr. Manuel Flores, I'd like to thank you very much for appearing on The Art of Medicine.
And thank you again for inviting me.
Now, before we close, I'd like to give another thanks to our sponsor, locumstory.com, a resource where providers can get real, unbiased answers about locum tenens. This program is hosted, edited, and produced by Andrew Wilner, MD, FACP, FAAN. Guests receive no financial compensation for their appearance on the art of medicine. Andrew Wilner, MD, is Associate Professor of Neurology at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center, Memphis, Tennessee. Views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on this program belong solely to Dr. Wilner and his guests and not necessarily to their employers, organizations, or other group or individual. While this program intends to be informative, it is meant for entertainment purposes only. The Art of Medicine does not offer professional financial, legal, or medical advice. Dr. Wilner and his guests assume no responsibility or liability for any damages, financial or otherwise, that arise in connection with consuming this program's content. Thanks for watching. For more episodes of The Art of Medicine, please subscribe. www.andrewwilner.com